there are different NR radio states that are recorded in the Android API that we get a lot of our data from, and operators can choose when to display the icon, and there is the most stringent 100% connected to 5G. So you are either connected to a non-standalone network or connected to a 5G bearer on a non-standalone network or 5G standalone. Then there are, at the other end of the spectrum, there's a 5G new radio state where you can operators will display the 5G icon if the user isn't connected to 4G on a cell that supports 5G. So the device doesn't see 5G, but it knows from the
grey area, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Hello, and finally, welcome back to the Telecoms.com podcast. It's been a full month, I believe. I've just been in England.
More than that even, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that, coming on for 5 weeks. I've just been in England, and actually August by England standards has been all right. But Pierre's bravely been off. Am I allowed to say where you've been, Pierre, or is it too doxy? He's been in Venezuela, where it's not exactly mega stable. But here we are. It's good to see you back.
Yeah,
Do you have any aggro getting back, or was it all quite smooth?
They were definitely, what is it, zealous is the word?
Zealous,
Sorry.
yeah.
At the emigration, because over there you have to do emigration.
Right.
And, they had
Because everyone wants to leave.
Yeah,
So they got to make sure you're allowed.
took forever, and
Just
there
getting
was,
out is hard to get.
Well,
back to
this
Europe.
time it was not in the past, but yeah, they had 5 security machines. Of course, only one worked.
Right.
The other ones looked fine.
Imagine quite a lot of shit doesn't work in Venezuela at the moment.
Yeah, or they say it doesn't work on purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Did they make sure you voted for Maduro before you left?
No, I
yeah.
couldn't vote anyway.
Well, there we are. So we've got, what I always do, I should always introduce our guest first. We've got a special guest. Thanks for joining us. Mark Giles, is it principal analyst?
Lead analyst.
Not quite principal. That'll be the next one.
Lead sounds better to me.
That'll be,
Thank you. I'm leading on something.
yeah, lead. Yeah, it's a
pleasure to be
marketing term.
He analyzes in principle.
Like we're a leading telecom news site. So from Ookla. So great to have you, Mark. Thanks for joining us and for helping us break our fast.
Pleasure. Guys.
And we'll get into what you do and what Ookla is all about shortly. So just to we can have try and keep it quick, but because we've been gone so long, and because Ian and I have just been to an event, that the initial bollocks section before we get onto Mark's day job might be slightly extended. Sorry, Pierre.
He loves extended bollocks section.
He doesn't. He gives me looks, and then he mutters when it's gone on for too long. And then you went to Slovakia.
I did.
Cool. How was that?
It's good. Yeah. It was pretty warm.
Yeah.
Very pretty over there.
Yeah.
So
You said that you're going to be shy with the beers while you were there.
had a lot of beer.
Yeah.
And it's still pretty cheap. I know
It's pretty pro beer over there. I
Not
bet.
that much in the last few years. So.
What's the one you were on?
It's Latibejan. It's the main one I
Right,
drink
that's
over
the-
there, which
Bless
means golden pheasant.
Bless you.
And mainly lager, Pilsner?
That's so rich.
Yeah, it's all Pilsner.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all Pilsner. You can't
Yeah.
really get anything else. But yeah,
Does it vary?
I can't really tell the
It
difference.
can be hard to tell.
between
I mean, I know that my favourite Pilsner is Star Up Ramen,
Yeah, you can get that there. It's Czech, so it's
but I couldn't swear, and I like Budweiser Budvar as well.
Yeah.
And I can definitely tell the difference in taste between those two.
yeah.
But a lot of the other ones, it's just that regular, proper lager taste, isn't it?
Yeah, the disappointing thing is that the Pilsner, you think Pilsner are Eastern Europe, but all the Pilsners they're not really Slavic at all. They're all started off by the Germans,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, I think the Germans invented a lot of beer, didn't they?
But even the stuff in the Czech Republic, like the old sort of Pilsner Urquell brewery,
That was actually some
it was
Germans.
It was Germans who did it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it was back in the days of the sort of Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I think you
where
get that.
the
You
Germans
get
were
that other
spread throughout that region.
Yeah, and all parts of the world, you get places
Yeah.
where some
Yeah.
lederhosen.
But you had
geezer
this sort of but I had this kind of vision of the Slavs sort of doing it, and of course
Doing
it's
their
not
own way.
like that.
In
It's,
their
it's,
own
all,
way.
it's all like
In their
people
monk
lederhosen.
outfits?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we are.
but it was nice. It was it's funny because my sort of nieces and nephews are now at the age where you can you want to have a conversation.
Right, and whereas
with
you've known them
They're-
since they were born, or
I've known
whatever.
them since they were like 3, so
Right.
or just being
Now you can
born,
chat to them, and they can
so-
speak a bit of English.
Yeah, because
Because you never quite sorted out your Slovak, did
My
you?
wife's parents can't speak.
It's like with me with Farsi, I never bothered to learn any Farsi.
I mean, the thing about Slovak is it would be more useful than it sounds because you can switch pretty easily to Czech.
Right.
And then even some of the other Slavic languages are kind of not that.
in that
It's a similar-
ballpark,
It's not that
like
big a
Romance
jump.
languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't done basically because I'm a bit
Cool.
lazy.
All right.
So
Jolly good. Well, it's only fair to have you had a nice holiday, Mark. Not that I've met you before, but
Indeed. No, I actually moved to Spain in February this year.
nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Driven largely by my wife. Her in-laws moved out there
Right.
So your wife's not
5
Spanish?
years ago. No,
Right.
she's actually Russian.
Oh, right.
Um,
Okay. What a cosmopolitan bunch we are.
I don't speak
Slavic
Russian.
language groups.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wait,
Well, that one is different because of all
Hold on.
the alphabet.
They shouldn't have allowed you because Brexit and
Yeah. And
no, that's not fair.
and Russia's bad, so that's two
Yeah.
reasons. Yeah.
Indeed.
Russia's not even allowed a flag at the
technically-
Olympics.
Oh yeah, indeed. And technically, she was born in Kazakhstan, and that's what it says on her passport.
Right.
She was then. It was on the border, and
Okay.
so anytime she's asked now, she's from Kazakhstan.
I
So
see.
do you speak
that-
any Russian?
Chut, very little.
Yeah.
Embarrassingly little.
Thought he was
having
gonna say
been there
yet.
for 20 years.
I can order a beer and then I can order another beer. So that's pretty much where mine.
I know how to
my
say
Slovak is.
sorry for what I said about Putin on the pod in Russian, and that's all. And I've learnt the same in Chinese about Xi Jinping.
Whereabouts in Spain?
Just south of Barcelona, or just on the outskirts of Barcelona. So having been there for Mobile Congress for the past
Do you know
15
what I mean?
years.
Is that basically you just can't be bothered with that commute once a year?
You can walk there now. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
going down towards Tarragona,
Yeah, not even as far as that, actually.
Right.
Just 5
that's
minutes.
really nice, that place,
Yeah,
I think, isn't it?
it is
It's
lovely.
absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm still to get sick of it. I mean, waking up
Yeah.
every day and it's blue skies, but
Yeah, lovely.
whole different language, only Pilsner oil.
So did you just come back here for this podcast then?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to meet my brother later. He's
You
coming
actually
down from
did. I
Scotland.
was joking. You actually did.
I did. I really
Oh,
did.
nice one.
Yeah, there you
Go us. In fact, well, actually, it's not to do with podcast. Should we save your bit of fan mail for later?
Should
Or
I?
should we do it? Yeah. So we got a bit of fan mail which we think is related to the second segment. So first segment will always be what our guests can talk about. So we'll find more about Mark, what his day job is, what insights about telecoms he can share with us.
Might just be somebody who reads loads of my stuff and
Yeah. Well, I've got a
reason.
theory. That's my
I-
working theory.
I think that whole quote should be in your LinkedIn bio. Just,
Yeah. But Ian got some fan mail in inverted commas, which is fun to talk about. But I'll save that
abuse.
because in the opening bollocks section we got to cover what Ian and I just went to an event immediately before this, which was hosted by BT/EE. I keep wanting to call them BT. That doesn't quite work, does it?
Maybe you never merger.
I know. I wish I'd just pick one. And actually, it was representatives of both kinds. It was Mark Alera, who was always the E CEO even before the acquisition,
Yeah.
and is now the BT consumer head. And then there was Mark Watson, who's their sort of
Howard
chief.
Watson.
What did I call
Mark Watson.
Mark Watson?
Only one
I'm
mark.
getting
Too
confused
many marks.
between you and the comedian, and Howard Watson. Who can be funny, but his day job is not a comedian. His day job is being the chief network
He
officer.
is actually quite funny.
He is.
You get him talking
Yeah.
about his alpacas and everything. And
He's got alpacas.
well, apparently a couple of them have died, so he's
Oh,
not got as
bit-
many alpacas as he
Sorry,
used to have.
sorry, Howard. Bit of a
But
sensitive subject.
Ray was joking that he's got to buy a lawnmower now because they basically just ate the.
Oh right,
all the
they just ate all
vegetation and-
the lawn, or get more alpacas,
We get more alpacas, but
or at greater llamas.
it sounds like they
Seem-
don't cope very well with life in the UK. These alpacas.
Yeah. Who would have known?
Brexit thing.
Who would have known these equatorial animals would struggle in the UK?
I wonder if he makes cheese out of their milk.
I'll tell you, he might know a thing or two about networks, but he's got a lot to know about alpacas. And South American wildfowl.
Yeah.
No. Anyway,
But he did by the way, he did the London Marathon this year. Howard Watson. So
Did he?
shout out to someone who did the London Marathon.
fair
That's
play
pretty
to him.
Impressive. I think.
no, he's a proper runner. Didn't we have that time where our colleague James Crawshaw was trying to keep up with him and
Yeah, he
struggled?
said he was. That was only over about.
Well, he
3
always
miles
goes
as
on-
opposed to 26,
Right, and he was
but-
still caning him.
He does a run in MWC every time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't talk. I'm sure James Crawshaw could run rings around me, but again, that's no
Does
great
quite a bit, I
compliment.
think.
Yeah,
Does
that's
a
no
lot
great
of cycling
compliment to
as
him.
well. So
Yeah, let's just stop talking about exercise. Couple of pods ago, we had
More beer.
a repeat guest of ours called William Webb, who said that he cycled something like 100 miles that morning just before
He
breakfast.
really does
or
look
something.
like a cyclist, William Webb.
Yeah.
Like, he's got the same body shape as people who do the Tour de France.
Yeah, he's very lean.
Really lean. Yeah.
And
Cycled into the office, drank some beer, and then
he
didn't drink.
he lives in
beer,
Cambridge. He quite often cycles from Cambridge to London. Anyway, so all these people can fuck off. I don't want to hear about them.
Yeah.
I don't cycle.
Yeah, good. You can stay. You shut up about running. You shut up about
I
football.
cycled about 20 miles, I think,
nice one.
in Slovakia one day.
Haven't I just covered this, Ian?
Yeah, I was just throwing it in there. It's
Yeah,
one of my active non-beer drinking days
Yeah.
when I.
Well, you were saying before we started recording that it's a good thing that you got some nice walks and cycles in. 'cause
Yeah,
of the
otherwise
beer
I'd
you
have
were
been.
caning. You look like
I'd
me.
have been a stone heavier.
So we went to this event, and I mean, I've already written it up because I quickly tapped it out just before this pod. And my headline was E&BT finally tried to wring some extra ARPU. Oh my God. I put APRU in the headline. I wonder if Andrew spotted it.
You better sort that out now while we're live. No one wants to read about APRU.
Yeah, you're going to get some fan mail off it.
Yeah, you're going to get some of the fan mail from the sort of people who write to me about editorial incompetence, and I'm giving it away. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a feeling the newsletter's already gone out.
Well, that's why I'm taking my time with my.
Yeah,
my
no, it
write-up.
went out ages ago.
Unless you can figure out what that could mean instead of ARPU.
So that now everyone's got a newsletter. In fact, Andrew sent it out about 10 minutes ago with APRU in it. Fuck. Anyway.
Maybe a new thing, a new
Yeah.
acronym.
APRU. People will be
Yeah.
thinking,
I know.
what is this APRU? Sounds like something to do with. It sounds like an abbreviation for sort of Aperol Spritz or something. I don't know, but
For those who are just listening, Scott has a gutted face.
Yeah.
yeah. No, I'd have the same expression on my face if I'd done that.
Well, it's just annoying. I mean, you quite often, because I quickly tapped this out and didn't have time to proof it, and Andrew missed it as well, and that's fine.
I think when you type on a keyboard, it's so easy to switch letters. Like you're more dyslexic typing on a keyboard than by hand.
Well, and often you don't notice your own typos until you go back to it and see it in a different format, which is as I just saw it now. So that's quite funny.
But you'd hope Google Docs at some point would say, hey, you've never typed that acronym before, it's always ARPU.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it
what
would.
about AI helping me out here? Anyway, it's a minor little gaff. But now people are receiving the email and going, oh, twat. And yes, I am a twat, I admit it. Anyway, so back to my flawed headline.
What it should say is,
Yeah. So the point of it is, and it's kind of annoying because the ARPU angle is kind of central. So ARPU stands for average revenue per user. And there's been a problem for ages, you could say decades, for operators to try and increase that ARPU, which is all important. I mean, as well as wanting to acquire more subscribers, they want to get more wedge out of each subscriber. That's the basic business model. And it's really hard because there's no reason, all of us who are subscribers, we can't think of a reason to not actually pay continually less, let alone more, for our communication services, because we kind of take it, it's kind of commoditized. We take it for granted a fair bit. We just expect it to work. And it's really hard for them to put any kind of premium on it. How could you say, oh, this is a much better thing, therefore you should pay more for it? It's a really
New
abstract thing.
Glitzy generations of tech.
Yeah, with Go Far to Stripes and all that sort of thing, a deluxe one. It's really hard for them to do. But that's basically what they're trying to do. The superficial point of it, as I wrote, I don't dare read any more of my story now. I'm just going to keep finding things and end up committing ritual suicide on the podcast. Was to talk about how they've launched their standalone 5G network in 15 cities. And then also to talk about a new router range of what they call smart hubs that use Wi-Fi 7, which is the latest flavour of Wi-Fi, which does better Wi-Fi somehow. I'm never quite sure how this works, but presumably better bandwidth, ideally better coverage and all that sort of thing.
All that.
Yeah. Or maybe you can drill down into that for us a little bit, Mark. But that was my take, is they're kind of bundling together, and obviously they can't talk to consumers about standalone 5G. It wouldn't mean anything to them. I still sometimes struggle. I mean, I know what it means. It's to do with, the 5G core rather than the 4G core. I'm exposing myself.
there you are.
Phew.
Yeah.
It means you can just carry it around. It's like standalone. It's not attached to anything.
It doesn't have a tripod.
Yeah.
It's been released, untethered
exactly.
from that shitty 4G core.
But consumers aren't going to be able to get their head around that. So Mark Alera, who's a marketing guy, and is obviously it's his job to communicate this stuff to the market and explain to them why it's worth paying extra for. He's basically bundling that together. He's saying there's certain little boosts, certain little bells and whistles. Obviously, the normal basic better connectivity service. There's these new routers. There's a few other things they've thrown in with it, like I think these plans have a thing called Network Boost, which they basically guarantee, I think, even outside of the 5G SA coverage, that you're going to get a better quality of service.
Interesting.
Okay. That's on 4G.
Yeah. Well, we got a bit confused about that, didn't we?
Yeah.
But this isn't one of these things where 4G where you pay for for something or other. Anyway, forget. Let's not get bogged down in that.
QCI, is it?
QCP, I think, or something.
Right.
Yeah, you probably know more about that than I do. But it's like it's a Quas thing in the 3GPPs, like standardised, apparently, according to Howard Watson, and he should know because he's done it.
Yeah, it's the difference between sometimes the host network and MVNOs. They'll be on a higher QCI. Yeah,
but I think the idea is, like you were saying, it's to if you've signed up for one of these 5G standalone services and you leave Bath, where it's one of the 15 cities where it's available, and then suddenly you're back into 4G, you're going to be going, hang on a minute. This isn't quite the service that I signed up for. So with Network Boost, they get around that problem. But I don't think it was very well described in the morning press conference, because they almost made out that Network Boost was the name of a slice that they were providing.
Yeah, well, we all found that a bit confusing. And then we also found it confusing with the 4G one, which apparently was something different as well, what they used to, that sort of boost button or whatever.
Right.
Remember that? Was that the thing where I think Dean Bubley used to say, he quoted us by saying it's the not shit button.
Right. but it doesn't seem like
an actual physical button.
Yeah. So, okay, we're going to go not shit.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like what they're doing with standalone at the moment is they talked a little bit about network slicing today, and I thought it was a little bit misleading. It was almost like this Network Boost was the name of a slicing service they were providing, and it isn't. There's not anything they're doing that's network slicing right now. There was a lot of talk. I actually thought they positioned it quite well, that what they're doing is getting the network ready for things that will emerge, so you have the opportunity in the future to do network slicing.
Build and they will come.
Exactly. And I kind of buy that argument. You don't want to be in a position, if these things do come along, where you've not got a network that can support any of it. If you buy into the story that some of these whizzy new applications are going to appear at some point, and maybe AI has something to do with that, I don't know. But we've got this news announcement also next week that everybody's anticipating in Cupertino, where there's a lot of speculation going on in various corners of the industry that Apple's going to say something about support for standalone as well as AI features that it's talked about previously.
And that's a big
intelligence stuff.
So, a big part of this launch. And to be fair, they did
getting it ready for things like this.
They are kind of future proofing, because I think it was Kester Mann from CCS Insight who was there, who asked the question about supporting devices.
Yep.
Because there aren't very many. They had little recorded video things from Cristiano Amon from Qualcomm, and some geezer's name I forget from Samsung.
He was less important to Samsung.
Yeah, well, I've met Cristiano, so his name sticks with me. Brazilian, incidentally. And clearly the message was that right now it's just some Samsung devices. And I think I was showing you that thing earlier. There was a.
Would you like another one?
He's all right. I already asked him, but more discreetly.
I
tried to just gesture so as to not interrupt the podcast.
Well, I think it's nice to interrupt the podcast and say, "Do you want a beer?" Because that's what we're
By the way, we should note that Mark is drinking Old School Sierra Nevada California IPA.
That's a nice beer, Sierra Nevada.
Yeah. But that's like the original. That was like before we start getting into all this Brewdog and Beavertown. It was Sierra Nevada, wasn't it? So that's OG IPA.
Yeah. Whenever I see it on tap, I'll go for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I did interrupt your train.
Yes, thank you very much.
Probably.
But yeah, not many devices. Yeah. So it's all very well them launching it in these 15 cities, but not many devices to be on it. But they've got to start somewhere.
The answer was that sort of got asked about in a roundabout way was how many consumers are there at the moment with devices that would be actually able to take advantage of 5G standalone. I suspect it's very, very small.
Well, that was it. Yeah.
But they were never going to say that, are they? It's probably like 3, and one of them's Howard Watson.
Yeah, I assume that it's part. testing to some degree as well,
Yeah.
right? In these
Well,
cities.
Qualcomm's got the chips.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to attribute it, but I was chatting to some people after, and they were talking to journalists, so they were slightly skirting around the matter, but they said, yeah, it's down to the smartphone vendors.
Well, they've got the chip. Samsung's got the gadgets. Let's make lots of
and
money.
if there aren't more smartphone vendors who've done it, the inference I got from this person I chatted to, who actually I can't remember who it was, so I'm not just anonymising them, was that smartphone vendors are just being a bit tight-assed about shelling out the extra to Qualcomm to have the dog's bollocks modems.
Yeah.
I think.
But
But
for MediaTek and the others to...
yeah, maybe, or just for Qualcomm to drop its pants a little bit. But that's kind of Qualcomm's business model, is to be first and charge a premium,
Not drop his pants.
and not drop its pants. I mean, Apple if Apple does launch on 5G SA, it will add to my hilarity, because I've been covering how much Apple hates Qualcomm for years, and they went to court and all that sort of thing, and in the end, Apple went, all right, and we'll pay some compensation. We'll keep using your modems.
Yeah.
Because Qualcomm's basically got a monopoly, certainly at the cutting edge of this stuff. I know MediaTek's good, but Qualcomm's tends to be about one generation ahead of them.
On the modems.
On the modems.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Apple does its own applications process.
Yeah,
Certainly the modem.
MediaTek.
Yeah.
And Apple will be looking at the US market, where T-Mobile's already rolled this out quite extensively, right? As opposed to maybe 13 towns.
So people are thinking
15.
15, sorry.
So are you trying to infer that they haven't exactly been first to market? Well, actually, I mean, I'll speak on their behalf. Their point was they were doing the classic thing: we're not first, but we're best, sort of thing that Apple tries to do, which has some validity in so much as, I think other UK operators have been sort of drip feeding it out, but not enough for much of an announcement, and not enough. What Mark Allaire is trying to do is go, all right, we're going to coincide this with a bunch of other launches and some other little bells and whistles like that. You can get stuff like a sort of Google premium subscription with all their AI and their cloud storage and other bits and bobs. Let's just bundle this all together and then put a bit of marketing heft behind it.
Including fixed, right?
Yeah, and then there's the fixed thing. I mean, specifically the routers. They had nothing to announce about the actual sort of fibre or the PON or anything like that. But that's an ongoing evolution, isn't it? But yeah, so then, let's say this thing, and they presumably got some kind of all-in-one tariff. I think they call it One, imaginatively. And I think fair enough. I mean, that's my summary. I've been banging on for a while, and I'll ask you first, Mark, as your guest. You weren't at the event, but do you agree with me that if they've got enough components together in this new bundle, they might finally have something that might persuade the average consumer to sort of think again and pay a premium for their connectivity?
Yeah, I think it's been the model for a while, hasn't it? Right, you bundle in content has been a big one for the past while,
and that's never quite taken off. I mean, even like BT's forays into sport and stuff, I don't think it paid off, did it?
Yeah, and ultimately it was bundling in the over-the-top providers, wasn't it? And then you had a ubiquity of those services anyway. I think it's a fair approach, right? You're looking to drive incremental improvements in ARPU, look for that competitive edge. The roaming one you mentioned earlier,
free. I mean, I'm slightly embittered about that because they say free European roaming. Obviously, we used to have that.
Yeah.
And then everyone slyly, except for O2, just said you got to pay £2.50 a day now to roam, which my understanding of, even talking to...
Five in the US.
Are you saying that they weren't completely truthful?
Well, no, I'm saying they didn't need to do it. Their inference was that since...
When they say prices won't rise after Vodafone and...
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Are you saying that...
Oh, well, yes. Well, that's a slightly different thing. But this was a post-Brexit thing, because obviously it was the EU, and, I slag off the EU a lot, but credit where it's due. That, that getting rid of roaming is, from a consumer point of view, I know it wasn't great for the industry because they made a lot of premium on that, but from a consumer point of view, it was brilliant. I've got half my family lives in the Canaries. We all go to Barcelona every year. What's up here?
Sorry, I just want to. You were talking about roaming and O2. I checked the O2. No roaming charges countries.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the whole of the EU, but I checked the list of the other countries, and Venezuela is in there, which is a big thing. El Salvador. Some countries you're like,
wow.
Okay. Honduras.
I think this is really interesting, the roaming
I don't know.
stuff, because I think that's a much bigger determinant of someone choosing a mobile service. Things
Could be.
like that. Like, so for instance, my son's on O2 and he's got 10 gigabytes, I think, unlimited minutes. And then when we go to Slovakia, he had his phone with him, he's using it all the time.
Right.
No extra fees.
Do you think
Whereas I'm on a super expensive tariff with EE, partly just so I can get like no roaming charges when I, to get that feature. I mean, some of it's to do with the device I've got, but it's a lot of money. And to have something that's £14, I think I pay for Alex a month, is that to me is like drives decision making. Whereas I'm dubious at a lot of this. I thought your question was really pertinent in the press conference.
All right, thank you.
That this is going to be a really, really, really hard sell to consumers.
It is.
With all this, but if you're not in a 5G standalone zone, there's boost.
Yes, it's so arcane.
I mean, Ray and I were chatting to Mark Henry a bit in the demo area, and he was saying that it is. I mean, he's a technical guy. He's like network strategy, but even he was sort of saying that getting this message out in the right way to consumers about how they can take advantage of some of this stuff and why it's important is really tough. It's because we struggle to get our heads around.
It's when you move beyond that
features.
core message of speed
to
other areas.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
it's like Gabriel Brown, who's one of our analysts within like heavy reading. I was chatting to him yesterday about standalone. I've talked to him loads about it before, but he's saying one thing you do notice is when you make calls, it's a lot quicker, the connection. You don't have that lag.
Yep.
And we had the obligatory demo of mobile gaming and how laggy before and after.
Yeah, so it's a
how
similar
laggy
thing. It connects a lot quicker when you're making a call, and you get this sort of latency benefits. But there's sort of small quality of service improvements, unless you're actually signing up specifically to some whizzy slice that gives you a service you could never ever get without a whizzy slice. It's like slightly incremental improvements,
exactly.
And I think it feeds into a good customer experience, and it's good for NPS and all that lot. But is it enough for someone to go, I'm going to pay another $15 a month for this?
Yeah, it's tough for you to say what is the actual benefit you're getting out of that. And that was when I think we were engaging with BT around standalone route metrics. They're a long time customer, and their question to us, because we also drive and walk test in the US, is what are the benefits you're seeing for T-Mobile on 5G standalone? We're definitely seeing improvements in latency, but then the radio access network is part of the equation, the core network's part of the equation, but it's also where the content's located too. And so if you're pulling content from halfway around the world, you do what you might on the mobile network or in the core network, you're still going to have a delay there.
Yeah.
You mentioned route networks, metrics. That's different from you, isn't it?
No,
that's part of Ookla.
Is it?
Ookla. Yeah.
Yep.
Where did Sylvia go? Is that route metrics?
No, she's
Open Signal.
Open Signal. I got confused.
It's easy to do.
So Sylvia, we've had on the pod recently, used to be at Ookla. And you two even go further back to GSMA Intelligence, don't you?
Yeah.
Where you both sat next to my colleague Armita. Shout out to Armita. Check if she ever listens to the pod.
Yeah, sure. Next time you say it, she'll
so you got that shout out, did you? Oh, really? Yeah, I remember hearing that.
The one thing I always remember about Armita is she always used to wear colourful socks.
Right.
Very random memory.
Well, do you know what? I hardly ever see her face to face because we work from home nearly all the time. Yeah. And I don't think it would be very professional of me on a Teams call to ask me to ask her to show me her socks. So
maybe not.
That might be a
next time you meet her, she'll be wondering why you're looking at her ankles.
Yeah. And I'll go have my monthly trip to HR. Okay. So yes. So that's that. I mean, I don't want to go out too long. I think I agree, and I'm pleased you asked the question. And the other funny thing about when I asked that question, I sort of followed up where, Mark, he's a very smart, competent guy, but he's a marketing guy and he's quite on message. And you get the impression that when he's answering you, it's almost like a politician. He's got his talking points. Yeah. And I like to sort of fuck with people who are like that a little bit. So I went, so no more ads of blokes getting shaved by robots on the top of mountains then. And he kept a completely straight face, and it's almost like he anticipated it. Perhaps when he saw me sat in the front row, he thought, I bet that fucker's going to ask that. And he goes, and he like defended that ad campaign, which I think was silly, but there will have been some rationale behind it.
Yes, you say it's silly, but you remember it.
There we are. I remember
it. Mind as an E
I remember it,
advert.
yeah.
And
I remember it, and I get what they were trying to do. I mean, it was back to...
Anything's good if you remember it.
Well, it was back to the point Mark was just making. It's bloody difficult to communicate this stuff. I mean, this is an intangible abstract thing, connectivity.
Yeah.
You know, and we've spoken about it on the pod before, going all the way back to like BT ads with Bob Hoskins. It's good to talk.
Yeah.
You know, and we think there's some cockney saying, "Why don't we have a natter?" Is somehow going to make us pick up the phone.
Chinwag.
Yeah.
Well, if he was on standalone, he wouldn't have to wait as long before he could get the conversation going.
Exactly. He wouldn't be getting a right ump. Waiting for
his connection?
Waiting for the phone.
At least 3 seconds.
Why do I sound like Xi Jinping fucking Ping? That's why I do a sort of London accent when I'm doing Xi Jinping, because obviously I don't want to get in trouble for doing a shit Chinese accent.
Yeah. So
it's evolved over time.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a callback to previous pods there. But it's really difficult to articulate this stuff. So that's why I have taken a piss out of those ads, and I did there. And he played a fairly decent forward defensive stroke to that. And basically what he emphasises, he kind of conceded my point, grudgingly, that they're going to focus more on real-world, day-to-day connectivity perks. You know, you'll be able to do this, that and the other, rather than these silly utopian things that they tried before, which I understand. They were trying to say how novel
the 5G
connectivity was, but I just think, you know, apart from the very good point that we all remember the ad, I don't think anyone's going, the amount of times I've tried to get a robot to shave me on top of a mountain and it hasn't happened. Oh, if I had a penny. So that's that. Okay. Ian, do you have any last thoughts on that event before I get back to Mark and his day job?
I mean, I think it's interesting in terms of them doing it across quite a wide area. You know, there's 15 cities, because I know some other operators have tried to introduce it in a more piecemeal way. I don't really want to name them, but I think it's they've taken an interesting approach. They were the first guys. I think they said this. They were the first guys to actually launch 5G, but have tried to do standalone in a more kind of, when we introduce it, we want it to be good. And the effort involved, like, I think a lot of people would think, and this is less consumer and more like for industry people, I guess, but the effort involved in going from non-standalone to standalone is maybe not that obvious. Why is it so difficult?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's slightly tricky even for us.
It is tricky. And that's what I was trying to ask, like Howard, when I was sort of
go for it, Mark. Don't be shy. We like the opening sound on the pod.
When I was sort of doing we all did our little sort of one-on-one chats with him, but I was sort of trying to get to grips with why it's been so hard. And a lot of it is just each radio site, they have to kind of look at, you know, what spectrum bands they're going to provision for 4G and what they're going to provision for non-standalone and what they're going to provision for standalone. And the thing that I think could potentially make quite a big difference for standalone, this is maybe getting into Mark's kind of territory, is, you know, because you mentioned T-Mobile, who have, you know, a really good reputation, I think, for like just pure availability of their 5G service compared with the two big competitors over there. And
partly because they use 600 megahertz a lot.
But it's exactly the same thing here. So when they've been doing 5G non-standalone, they've had to run when you're connecting to the 4G core, and you're going back through the control plane and the user plane, you're having to sort of bring 1800 megahertz into play, which is what they've used for that, which isn't very good for indoor coverage. And when they're using 5G standalone and putting it onto a lower band that's 700 megahertz, which they're using there, they can, which they've sort of used for the 5G standalone network, they can get much better indoor signals. So it might have a big impact. One of the real benefits of it might actually be to make a difference to the kind of indoor coverage that we've got, which I think that's massive personally.
Yeah.
Because you go into a pub in London and you don't want to mess around trying to get onto a Wi-Fi network and log in with that. Go and ask the bar staff what the login is, just to be able to go in and have a 3 or 4 bar experience.
And you wonder how private and how secure that
could be, I think, a real selling point. Forget about all the low latency or network.
Well, and do you know what? It didn't occur to me, because I actually heard that
coverage.
I actually heard that directly from Howard Watson. We each had little one-on-one briefings with Howard, and you were first, I was second, and Ray, who used to work with us, was third. And Ray was bitching about how he had fuck all time, and he was blaming me because I was the one immediately before him. But I think it was you that overran. You
Probably.
We only got about 10 minutes. I think you took about 15. So you stole 5 minutes of Howard Watson's time from Ray.
Well,
so if you're listening, Ray, it's his fault, not mine.
I'm glad that I did that.
Yeah, there we go, because he's a competitor now. But yeah, he told me that, and it wouldn't have occurred to me until I'd had that. And here's one for you to think about, if you're listening. You know, that wasn't that clearly communicated in their main presentation, and certainly not in their press release. But the fact that the move to 5G SA actually has coverage implications, is quite significant, because that's a cardinal pain point, isn't it, for any mobile subscriber?
It's a massive pain point for 5G as well, because of the bands that have been used with non-standalone, that they can bring this 700 megahertz into play and get these sort of indoor benefits. And then the other thing I thought was interesting was how a lot of it's kind of linked to the Huawei swap out.
Right, which is something you got and I didn't.
You know, the 15 cities they've done it in have all been, they're all big kind of population centres, which is one reason.
Including London? Or?
Yeah, London's on the list. It's pretty much all the big cities, anything you can think of, plus a few others that aren't maybe not immediately obvious, like Bath. It's apparently because Mark Henry lives there. So no, he joked, but
and Alex Jackman.
And Alex Jackman. So yeah, but they're also places where they've got lots and lots of Ericsson and Nokia equipment, and have basically managed now to get like the Huawei stuff out, because they're still on that journey to sort of get
core
all the 4G
migrations, a longer term one.
The cores, as far as I'm aware now, is pretty much done.
Okay.
And the RAN is 2027. They've got to get it out the RAN. And what Howard said to me on the record was, I'm not going to tell you how many 5G sites we have left, but it's not very many. But there's still kind of a rump of 4G stuff that they need to get out. But these cities are.
Did he say rump?
Yeah, he did use that word. Yeah.
Cool. That's a good word. I want to use that more.
Yeah, but these cities are places that are kind of Huawei free, because they couldn't use that equipment to do standalone. They weren't going to work on upgrading that. It would, because you've got to get rid of it eventually. And then this shift from the core, the thing you mentioned, getting everybody off the Huawei core and onto this new Ericsson converged core. The alternative to doing that and getting everybody over and then shutting down the Huawei core would have basically been to sort of introduce a separate kind of just standalone core and have more complexity in the network. And they just wanted to make it a bit smooth. People are really critical, like some people we know on the analyst side are quite critical of how they've not been as quick as that maybe they could have been to get Huawei out of the network.
Right.
Countries like Denmark and whatever have done it much more speedily. But Howard said that every time they've looked at that Huawei replacement as every time they go somewhere and have to replace Huawei, they don't just want to do a like-for-like swap. They want to do it where they're getting a better thing.
Yeah, and that was always a thing. That's one thing. I mean, you referred to some analysts who criticise them, and maybe it's the same analyst. But one of the things I learnt from John Strand way back when all this...
It is John who's mainly critical.
Yeah, because he's quite hawkish on Huawei. But is to think about upgrade cycles. And let's say, for the sake of argument, they're 10-year upgrade cycles. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. But let's say it's and then suddenly the government goes, right, you got to swap out Huawei, and you're halfway through an upgrade cycle. For it to cost you money, you would have to swap it out before you would normally have upgraded it anyway. If you do it when you would normally have upgraded it anyway, there's no extra cost except for maybe the differential in what you pay Ericsson versus what you pay Huawei.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about. And so I think. Of course they're going to drag it out, because it's a depreciating asset, and not until they fully sweated that asset do they want to bin it.
Yeah, trying to minimise your costs, absolutely. Yeah, and I think in the US and maybe some other markets, there's been some government funding to help support that move, but not in the UK.
Not in the UK, exactly. Yeah, they didn't get any help at all. So
anyway, on the whole, I thought it was an interesting launch. I actually wish the best for them to pull it off, because not only will it be good for them, but it will set a kind of precedent for the industry that says, well, hold on a sec, you can get money out of people, but you got to offer them quite a lot.
The one other thing I'd say is, because there was an AI angle on it, wasn't there? They're kind of quite keen to position AI within this, as anybody is these days. You've always got to bring up AI. But Howard was saying...
It's already become a bit hackneyed for me. But
but Howard was saying that because it's cloud native, and you can sort of distribute the core more easily around different premises with standalone, and they've got it sort of at 16 facilities, I think, whereas you go back to the sort of 4G days and it was just sort of a centralized kind of core. They've got this sort of distributed core, but it allows you to kind of take workloads and put them where it's most appropriate in the network. And he thinks that will suit like the launch of kind of AI services in the future, because you could just be a lot more kind of flexible in terms of where you're putting compute resources to suit those kinds of needs. So when you've got this announcement coming out next week from Apple, and no one really knows what they're going to say, but let's speculate that it is something to do with standalone and AI, then it kind of fits quite nicely into that. It kind of dovetails quite nicely with that. So I kind of buy this idea to some extent that they're future, I don't like the expression, but sort of future-proofing the network, kind of designing it in a way that, like you say, build it and they will come. I mean, you build it and so that when they do come, it's there and you don't have to kind of go through a big upgrade and you're kind of late to the game sort of thing.
So you go on.
Oh no, it's really difficult for telcos to differentiate on the network still, right?
Well,
These
quite.
network upgrades are going for. If you can't explain it clearly to a consumer, then they ain't.
And it's a real challenge. And that's where, while I will gently take the piss out of some of Mark Alera's previous ad campaigns, I do it with sympathy because it's a fucking difficult concept to come over. And as you say, future-proofing, you're not going to sell future-proofing as a thing by itself. So I actually think he's right. Not that I know anything about marketing, and not that Mark Alera is thinking, I wonder if Scott would approve before he launches into a multi-million-dollar ad campaign. But I actually think this makes the most sense of just bundle together a bunch of stuff, try and find a way of communicating that in a reasonably coherent, concise way.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that'll do it. Anyway, we better move on because we've only got an hour left and we haven't even got... that was the bollocks. We've only just finished the opening bollocks and we've only got an hour left. It was good bollocks.
But that
was telecom bollocks.
It was a segment.
5G thing.
Yeah, no, it was a whole segment. We'll see if we run out of time for my self-indulgent segment, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
But let's get on to Mark. So why don't you just give us a quick elevator pitch of what you do and what Ookla's all about? And by the way, I'll say for most people who don't know anything about Ookla, they probably know the speed test app because that's certainly the first time I encountered the brand. Sorry for butting in. Over to you.
Not at all. No, thank you for the intro. So I've been at Ookla for 3 years now. Before that, GSMA for 10. Ovum before that. So I was an analyst for a traditional analyst firm, Omdia now.
Yeah, which is owned by Informa.
Indeed.
As are we.
Yes.
As am I. I'm owned.
Well,
Stephen Carter owns my
Informa
ass.
own everything.
Informa owns everything. It certainly owns this building. Anyway, sorry, Karen.
And it's an impressive building too. But so moved to Omdia, moved to Ookla 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Get it right, Mark. So Ookla is a company that deals in data and insights for connectivity providers. Their mission, and we always come back to the mission in Ookla, and I know it can sound a bit trite, but it's to measure, understand, and improve connected experiences. So that guides what we do. We're owned by Ziff Davis. It's a NASDAQ-listed firm, a conglomerate, really, of media and other assets.
The DNet.
Yeah, with IGN's part of that, PC Mag, Mashable, others, Eurogamer. So a bunch of properties there. And they've supported us in this vision that our CEO has to build out that capability. So we've been quite acquisitive since I've been there and before. We own Down Detector.
Right.
Down Detector.
That comes every time something freaks out. They've kind of cornered that market.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fairly recent CrowdStrike outage.
That's right. Yeah.
And others. So
no, that's a really good service.
Yeah.
And the Ookla speed test one was always the one that first sprung to mind for me when I was wondering why my phone's so shit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we once had Tony Stark running a speed test in his Iron Man gear.
Are you now? Was that a product placement or was it spontaneous?
Spontaneous.
It was spontaneous. So it's just
a
stroke of luck.
I don't want to
not paying for it.
It's huge for us.
I don't want to blow smoke up. Anyway. But what else are you
leave my ass out of this?
You know what I mean, what else are you going to use?
Oh yeah,
for speed. You know what I mean,
there are other speed test apps available.
Like Bing for searching.
There's definitely a lot of copycats. We you get copycats springing up around the world that we have to sometimes have words with the local authorities to try and get them to stop using very similar.
Right.
I think you need to get Ookla used as a verb a bit more.
I've Ookla'd my phone.
I'm going to Ookla that speed.
It sounds like something clumsy though, but
it's a funny word, isn't it?
I think
it seems like it's like Scandinavian or something.
It actually stems from a comic book from I think the 70s called Thunder the Barbarian, and there was a character in there called Ookla.
Right.
And I won't go into it anymore, but
you can Bing it, Scott.
I'll Bing it. Well, that sounds like a sort of thing a geek comes up with. And most technological companies are founded by geeks.
100%.
I think the key is the URL, which is speedtest.
Yeah.
.net. Like you can't beat that.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So a big part of our company is built around crowdsourced data. So that's the speed test app, that's Down Detector app as well.
And that is, sorry to butt in again, the reason you offer this thing for free, which is quite a useful service for us, is in return, like with most internet things that are free in inverted commas, we're actually giving you some useful, as you say, crowdsourced data. Sorry to butt in, I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So on the speed test side, we package up the insights we get from that. We obviously anonymize it to make sure we're compliant.
Try that after another Sierra Nevada.
And we engage with operators to help them optimize and improve their networks. So that's the bulk of our business. On the Down Detector side, we sell into a range of industry verticals. So operators use us quite a lot in the NOC, SOC, and customer response or customer care center just to get that early warning. These services are down because who are you going to call when something goes wrong on your device? It tends to be your operator first, and you automatically think, BT, what are they doing? But actually, it may be AWS, or it may be the individual service itself that's gone down.
So among your sort of commercial partners are operators who want to have insight into whose fault it is.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. They get that early warning system, and they're also able to communicate with the consumers via the Down Detector platform to say, okay, we're seeing there are reports of these problems. If it's a telco, they can put some messages on the platform just to indicate what's the status. We're working on a fix, etc. Or the problem's not ours, I guess. So that's on the crowdsource side. We also do some more controlled testing. The root metrics is a prime example of that. We test in the US and UK. We do some other more localized testing, and this is controlled testing. So it's not the crowdsourced data. It's where we're going out with the latest devices on a predetermined route. It's a mix of walk and drive, just to really assess and benchmark the networks. And then the other
can I just ask, when you do those sorts of drive tests and walk tests, because I know there's a few companies that do this, but do you do it at different times of the day? Does that come into play? Because you obviously get times when there's might be an event on, or it's, if you do it at 10 in the morning, it's quite different from doing it at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Through the day, at night sometimes. I think the desire is to replicate as much as possible how people are
quite an effort
using
to do
the
it,
network.
I guess. To have people going out at all these different times and intervals.
Absolutely. And we also recently walk test the Hajj in Saudi, which unfortunate amount of casualties at that event for the heat.
How long's that route?
I'm not sure.
You didn't do it yourself?
20, no, my goodness. I wouldn't be allowed in.
It's not short though, is it? No, you have to be.
You've got to be a full Muslim to do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you're not allowed in Mecca at all if you're not a Muslim, are you?
I think parts of the Kaaba, the religious center. Yeah, no, you're not. Yeah. But also it includes a walk to Mount Arafat and walk up that, which it's not. I understand it's not a huge mountain, but it is.
It's a mountain.
It's still up.
Yes. In circa 40 to 50 degrees.
So I imagine, so leaving aside the heat, and as you say, most years there seems to be some minor catastrophe there, which, I'm not a religious person, but I don't know what the fuck's going on there. But obviously what you've got is an enormous crowd of people, so and presumably quite a lot of them. Yes. I don't know if they're allowed to selfie the Hajj or something.
I don't know either.
Do you know what, Pat? I better just stop joking about this. I might get...
You might get
in trouble.
Yeah.
Anyway, you brought. I think a lot of
it's your fault. No, there's a lot of selfies because they want to share the experience.
Okay, so they are allowed.
People back home
because
it's a once in a lifetime thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
A long way.
Pilgrimage. Yeah. Interesting.
So we do that. Root metrics, the control testing side, and then we also have a product called. A brand called Ekahau. And Ekahau does Wi-Fi monitoring, optimization, and planning. They've got a handheld device called the Sidekick 2, where a lot of IT professionals will get it and go and you can walk around a building, map out the floor, and then it will pinpoint the access points you have and look at the signal strength around there. So it helps you say, okay, we need access points here, there, and the other.
That sounds very handy. In fact, this sort of came up in the EE thing because they've got these new routers, and then part of these new routers, and they've got Wi-Fi 7. You might be able to tell us a little bit more about it. We're a bit, I think you're the same, Ian. We kind of overlook Wi-Fi, perhaps too much, just because for me, I sort of discount it. It's just like everyone's got Wi-Fi, it's unlicensed spectrum, everyone's got a fucking router. But it's actually, we spend most of our connected time on Wi-Fi, so perhaps we should care more about it. So, two things. I don't know if you can shed any more light on whether or not we should care about Wi-Fi 7 and whether that's a big deal. And then just secondly, what you were saying sounds really interesting because we all have unsatisfactory Wi-Fi experiences, but we often don't know why. Is it just walls? Or is it just a shit router? Or is it just too many people in the room? So, just those two things. It'd be interesting to explore the Wi-Fi a little bit more.
Yeah, and we see, looking at the speed test data, so we're able to test from the router we have some embedded data sets where we have router partners who will put speed tests on the router itself, so we can look at the speed of the connection into there and then what's delivered within the premises as well. And often huge disparities and very variable. You'll know this, right? We'll have had Wi-Fi issues, whether it's being lack of propagation to certain parts of the house. I think some operators have been pretty good on this. BT's one that offers this whole home Wi-Fi.
They had a mesh thing as part of this thing they announced this morning as well.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Smart
Indigo.
Hub. Oh yeah, that was their proprietary software, and then their partner. Ray asked that question. Their partner was some kind of mesh standard, but it wasn't the Plumey one.
But you can plug. They did say you can use Plume. It's just.
But then they sort of went, but we don't recommend it.
It's not going to be as good. Basically.
And that's the problem. As soon as you want to add any Wi-Fi equipment to your house, you automatically need to become an IT engineer. I've tried doing it in mine, and I figure myself fairly competent.
I tried installing Plume
twice
with BT's equipment and failed miserably.
He failed. Yeah. To be fair to Plume, I didn't fail. So you read into that what you want about the respective competence of me and Ian.
Yeah.
But then again, that's where Ray's question he asked was good. How proprietary is this stuff? So,
how many end user devices, terminals support?
Yeah, and your point about when you're trying to extend your network and you're trying to put. I even go all the way back to wireline, power line networking.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I used to have that. It actually worked all right.
Yeah. I'm using that right now.
Yeah.
At home, yeah.
Power line networking.
Yeah, you actually use electrical.
What are you two on about?
You network
making
via
things up as you're going along.
just winging it.
Plugging into the electrical socket.
Didn't you know about power line networking? You actually stick a plug into a normal plug socket.
No, wait. You connect it from the router to the plug, and on the other end, another plug.
But then it goes through the electrics
Yeah.
as like an Ethernet cable. It uses the electrics as the proxy for an Ethernet cable. The copper, yeah.
Learn something every day.
Call yourself a telecoms journalist.
It's not great.
That's not even telecoms, is it?
To tell you,
what is it if it's not that?
It's the bowels of telecoms.
It's a shitty end.
It's a bit
not open RAN, so you're not interested.
It's not great. At home, so next to the router, I get 900 like crazy speed, and then in my office, I get 50 at best with the power line. So it really
it's not the best.
Drains on the way.
It's not the best, but it was good interim technology. But it is an interesting thing, and and if they get this right, going back to the E thing, if they get this right, and as we all all agree, and we've all got like partners or relatives who are normies, who don't spend their whole working lives thinking about telecoms,
and of course because you're involved in telecom, something technical, you are IT support, right? Yeah.
But they just like want things to work, and so ultimately, if Mark Allaire could go, our shit just works. There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
Our shit just works. Stamp guaranteed. Then that would be quite compelling.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Apple says? Yeah. Don't worry about the amount of RAM, whatever. It just works.
Right.
Yeah, I think the Wi-Fi generations thing's interesting too. I think when we look at it at a global level, we can look in the speed test data and we can see the router that people are testing through. Still a huge install base of Wi-Fi 4 and Wi-Fi 5. Wi-Fi 6 is advancing rapidly. The last time I checked.
And then they were already on 7.
Yeah.
So I'm probably on like 4 at home or something. How often does new generation Wi-Fi come along?
Well, do you know what I'm on?
5 years.
Yeah.
Pierre and I will both be on 6.
Mm-hmm.
because you've got community fibre.
Yes.
Okay. And are you happy with your experience?
I only have the one node.
You got a new gaff, and you said it's quite long.
It's a long place.
And they gave you a little booster. Is it mesh? It's not plumy. We'd know if it's plumy.
Mesh?
You would.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh wait, hold on. Let me ask you something. So you've got the fiber going into that Atran box, and then that goes into the first node, and then the other node is somewhere else.
There's two. So I've got two repeaters that just plug in I just plug it into the wall.
So they're not like it's not like the main node.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they pick up the signal from the other.
Is it Linksys as well?
It's Linksys. They're both Linksys boxes.
Mesh. I mean,
they look like the main one that you've got. They look like the same. You've got the Adtran box, and then you've got a tall Linksys tower.
Yeah.
There's two more of those, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I might defer to Mark if he knows better. But Mesh is what Ray was asking about when we were in their little future zone. And it's what Plume is. And it's basically a way of having these connected nodes. And the Mesh is...
Yes, it's those.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's £269 for two. That's expensive.
Yeah, that's why they're charging me £7 a month.
And you will know at the start of the second line, Pierre is holding us up an Amazon thing for the product Ian's got, and it says Mesh on it.
It's also got 3.8 out of 5 stars.
Oh dear, that's not ideal, is it?
Yeah.
Not for Amazon, where you expect everything to be in the high 4s.
Mesh.
But anyway, I mean, maybe you can explain it better, Mark, and if you can't, then fine. But Mesh as a concept, how is that different from just having a couple of what Ian calls repeaters?
I think it's very similar to that, right?
Yeah.
So it just depends. Mesh is you throw a bunch of access points into a house or a building or an office or whatever, and they connect to each other wirelessly. So they backhaul from the other access points to the main router. Right. Generally wirelessly, I understand, although you can Ethernet them if you're able to, and they propagate the signal, and you'll get some degradation because you are obviously you're moving the signal across multiple units, but it gives you that better coverage.
And Plume claims that there's a sort of smart element to it, whereby
AI.
Yeah, well, AI and actual boring old human beings. Whereby they sort of see, like, if one access point has got a shitload on it, they try and be smart and offload it onto a nearby one. So whether or not they succeed is another matter, but that's part of their marketing.
Sorry,
I'm just repeating the message.
I'm sorry.
You're not
that
convinced?
To me is like a classic case of someone going, "Oh, let's get AI into our marketing and call ourselves an AI company."
Yeah, well, there is a lot of that. I mean, I must admit, I was skeptical when they started banging on about AI.
It's just a bit of clever analytics. It's not. AI.
It's just some rules. Right?
Yeah,
if this is too busy, throw it over there.
It's like you could go back to software that was probably introduced at the time of Windows and say that's AI because it does this when the load's too high. It'll automatically switch something over. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I completely agree. I think AI has been
a used term. That
has been overused to the point of almost...
Well, this is why...
Like, I almost just write it off when I hear it.
Going a bit tangential, but this expression that's now creeping in, we've had cloud native being used a lot, which is a little bit hard to get your head around, actually, I think, what people mean by cloud native. But people are now starting to throw in AI native. And to me, it's from a networking perspective, it's completely meaningless. Because
I just picture someone like in a grass skirt.
No one really knows what AI actually is. AI gets used to describe everything from the use of large language models to this little bit of Plume sort of wizardry that they seem to think's AI, but isn't.
Plume, God, their attempt at PR, you fucking backfired, didn't it?
Network, I don't get at all, frankly.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to read. This is Michael Ayres' canned quote from the press release. So this wasn't him said live today. Unlike you, I'm not very good at typing quickly, but I just copied and pasted his canned quote from the press release. He goes, "Today EE is launching UK firsts in network capabilities designed to unleash the huge potential of a wave of AI-powered devices." I think that's too complicated a first sentence myself, but there we go.
Yeah.
But the reason I mention it, and I could go on, but he does mention AI at least once more. I'll get that far. He goes, 5G standalone is a new mobile network giving enhanced performance to customers from day one. That's quite good. I think that's a good, simple, words of one syllable way to explain it to a normal punter. And unlocks game-changing, don't approve of that, new services for the future. Yeah. I think Mark doesn't mind the odd American marketing cliche. It's been built to handle the growing range of AI-powered devices, from smartphones to laptops, tablets, and more. Now, so there's two emphasis on AI-powered devices, one with a hyphen between AI-powered and one not. So I don't know whose fault that was, but that's some sloppy grammar in the press release.
But all those AI-powered devices, they're going to be doing the AI processing on the device.
Well, but that was an interesting thing. This came up when I was chatting to Howard Watson.
Says the man who put APRU in his headline.
Yes, I know. Oh. Shots fired.
Too soon. Too soon.
No, you're right, and maybe I'm projecting by looking for grammatical errors in other people when I'm so guilty of them myself. But nonetheless, I know it was a good cuss, wasn't it?
It was. I don't think you can recover from that.
Yeah, I'm just going to move on.
So you'll get to laugh at me when that email gets read out shortly.
No, I'll laugh at your troll. No, it's fine. It was a good point. But anyway, but my cuss still remains. I mean, even within one quote, they couldn't get grammatical continuity. I mean, that's just shocking. Yeah, AI-powered devices twice. And I was chatting to Howard, and I was going, so is this like, are we saying that AI is a big burden on the network? So we know that they've all got chips, and like Qualcomm goes on about how it's got a neural processing unit and stuff like that. And then there'll be a bunch of processing in the cloud. I think was it Apple? Someone launched a thing where there was a certain amount of processing on device, but if you wanted the dog's bollocks, it could be like,
that's Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, there we are. It was Apple.
So they're talking about doing some of the processing on the device.
Yeah.
With the.
But the main grunt was in the cloud.
Siri. But then if you want something better, OpenAI is like crunching stuff from deep within the...
And so the assumption is if a lot of the processing has to be done remotely, then there'll be some additional burden on the network. Although other people we chat to, I think maybe we chat to Gabe about that.
I think the whole point was that it was all done on device so that you have to upgrade to a new device.
No,
there's definitely plenty of cloud processing.
You're having to go back to what's happening at the large language model level. But I don't think that has any... From the people that I've talked to on the CTO side, and I think the BT, like Mark Henry was kind of going on about this a bit on the sidelines today, who's like the network strategy guy, but that doesn't have an impact on network traffic. They do their processing stuff that requires huge compute capability.
But the actual signal...
The signal that you're getting is not like...
Yeah.
And doesn't have huge bandwidth or latency.
It doesn't have huge bandwidth or latency. Even if it's... William Webb was talking about this because there's all this, AI, it's going to be like... gigabytes and on the network, and we're all going to be, we're all going to need to upgrade, spend loads more money on network upgrades, and it's like, basically, if it's a video, the video is the most the hungriest thing for.
So that's all.
So even if it's an AI video, it's still a video. It doesn't the processing that happens within the data center doesn't have an impact on that.
So I brought that up, and you're right, and I've heard the same that it doesn't have a huge amount of data traffic implication.
Mark Henry was saying one of the reasons, so he went to an event apparently that was to do with 6G, where he was saying there was one of the use cases is potentially sending large language models around the network, like actually sending a large language model over the access network. And he was like, we're not going to do things like that. You might have a small language model on the device and a large language model in the data center, but you're not actually sending a model.
That'll trigger their fair contribution fucking stuff.
Yes.
But obviously the guys that sell network equipment love it because they want someone to spend a load of money on their stuff, even if the operators aren't making any themselves. So they don't really have to worry.
You reckon he can hear you buzzing out your pocket?
Really?
Yeah.
I
don't know, put it in.
Just chuck it on the coat there. Anyway, I'm going to wrap that up partly because we've got other stuff we want to talk about, and I haven't really. We always say when we have a guest, we always like to focus on their core area, and all we've done is bang on about this fucking E thing for about the last hour. So I'm going to just pivot back to you, Mark. I've got two questions. Firstly, why does everything you've just described about Ookla and all these other funky sounding sub-brands that you got are very interesting? It's obviously a cool company and it's a well-known brand, if only via the speed test app. But my first question is, why does a company like that need a lead analyst? And then secondly, did you have any other stuff that you thought about when you're coming on this pod that you thought might be cool to talk about that we have got nowhere near that you want to flag up? So you have the floor, Mark.
Yeah, no, cool. On topics, I'm like, happy to delve into news, any recent news.
Okay, well, we'll test out how happy you are in a minute.
We'll see. Maybe I'll backtrack on that one. Topics on 5G in Europe, 5G in the UK. We've written about that in the past.
So how is the UK in the great scheme of things?
I think it's where it is just now.
That's not an answer.
No, it isn't at all. I think we're at a point in deployment of 5G networks where you've had that initial rollout, and the operators. It's interesting to see BT's move there into standalone because we very much thought that everyone's
slow?
in a bit of a holding game,
right?
Waiting to see where they deploy.
We're like 5 years into 5G, and now they're going, ta-da, we're doing proper 5G.
It is a bit
proper
like that.
5G, yes, real 5G.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what standalone's code for, isn't it? It's proper 5G.
Yeah, and we rushed it out with non-standalone.
Yeah.
And even from the testing point of view and from our data point of view, non-standalone is tricky because it relies on the 4G. It relies on the 4G on LTE. And when you're looking at the data, and this is the 5G availability data that was talked about by Craig Moffat, and you guys have written about it. I've delved into this a little bit with some of the RF engineers at Ookla and trying to understand it, and you can go quite deep on it.
Yeah.
With non-standalone, there are different settings that the operator or parameters they can choose for when they display the 5G icon on a device. And we had a situation in late 2022 looking at the data in Switzerland. So one of the providers who was clocking fastest provider in the market on 5G median download speed suddenly just dropped by 100 megabits per second. This was month on month, and possibly even, if you drill down to weeks, it would have been more of a steep fall off. And it automatically raised alarm bells. If our metrics are showing 100 megabit per second drop for the median user in Switzerland, what the heck's going on? What have they done to their network? And we dug a bit deeper, spoke to our contacts at the operator, and they had adjusted this SIB2 parameter, which governs when the 5G icon is displayed. And there are different settings. So I'll go into as much detail as I'm able to, but I'm not an RF engineer. But there are different
fucking club.
There are different NR radio states that are recorded in the Android API that we get a lot of our data from, and operators can choose when to display the icon, and there is the most stringent 100% connected to 5G. So you are either connected to a non-standalone network or connected to a 5G bearer on a non-standalone network or 5G standalone. Then there are at the other end of the spectrum, there's a 5G new radio state where you can operators will display the 5G icon if the user is connected to 4G on a cell that supports 5G. So the device doesn't see 5G, but it knows from the
grey area, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. So that's why you can get massively different 5G availability values.
And the Americans, they started jumping the gun. There was I seem to remember there was a big intrigue about 4 or 5 years ago where one of them, I think it might have been AT&T, was displaying 5G on a phone where it was 5G fucking nowhere near. Right. Yeah, all that. That was AT&T, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
That just seemed like a
piss take. They end up getting told off by the advertising
FCC,
standards or whatever. The FCC, one of those.
Yeah. But I can see that happening again with 6G, with 5G Advanced being sort of positioned as we've got 6G, and I hope they don't do. I mean, maybe they've learned their lesson by now that people don't really care about these generations anyway from a consumer perspective.
Well, I think we've chatted lots of times on the pod.
I mean,
like talking to people like William Webb, the G's as a useful marketing concept.
But your
surely diminish
your story today. And your questions,
typos and all,
typos and all, Aperol and Aperol Spritz,
Aperol Spritz.
but the kind of trying to charge more for a better quality of service or whatever it might be. I seriously hope they don't go out there with marketing campaigns that start talking about real 5G or standalone, which would be even worse, actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they won't say standalone.
I think that I sort of would hope, and I think those days are over where they talk up generations, and I don't think they'll actually do that with 6G. I think 6G is not going to be
angled so hard to consumers.
I just don't think they'll talk about 6G at all. I don't think they'll. I'm quite downbeat about 6G, I suppose, and I think the industry is anyway.
I think everyone should be.
But I think we need a delay in the launch, right? We need to stretch the tech cycle.
This 10-year cadence thing, it doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
I mean, it's kind of forced anyway. We've chatted about it before. We understood 3G kind of set it, and 3G was around the dot-com bubble, so there's a lot of other tech hype going on.
Yeah.
And then we had 4G, and that actually was a thing in that it was proper mobile broadband. But that sort of set a cadence, just that one 10-year gap seemed to set in stone this 10-year cadence, which I don't think applies anymore.
And 3GPP worked diligently too, right?
Yeah.
I remember around as 5G was progressing as a standard, like 2017, 2018, the discussions around it. I remember I was at the GSMA at the time, so very operator pro the 5G evolution. I remember going to speak to because it was on the analyst side, going to speak to some investment brokers, and they were saying, it's all about the growth story for telecoms. The telecom CEOs, because they've built out all of these networks and they've optimized their earnings to OPEX, or they're trying to do that. They pay a dividend. All the focus from the CEO there is on the share price.
Yeah.
And they can cut their way to growth. That's an ongoing story. But
it's the default way.
Yeah. If they were able to deliver 1% annualized growth, not through
the revenue.
Not through inflation-led increases. Their share price would jump 10%. Was the story I was hearing at the time,
right?
And that's what they're constantly chasing.
Yeah, well, that revenue. Then back to the Aperol spritz.
You're leaning into that.
They need a bit of spritz.
Well, like I said, I've got to own my fuck ups. And I'm sure this is something, as you just alluded to, that came up a lot in your GSMA time. I mean, Ian's has been much more sort of fully informed and comprehensive in some analytical pieces he's written before about the doldrums we're in. And I've been trying to coin the term telecoms recession as well. I mean, the telecoms recession term is, for me, more spending on kit, because I'd say probably a core thing that I think that Telecoms.com and light reading focus on is kit vendors, so Ericsson, Nokia,
that's
Huawei, etc.
That's more like a
depression. Exactly. And so that's why the operators aren't buying anything off them, so they're having a nightmare. Although we'll get onto that in a sec, because not all of them are they? And the reason they're not buying any is because they're not getting any return on their previous round of spending. And the reason they're not getting any return on the previous round of spending is back to my Aperol spritz. They can't get any more money out of consumers.
Yeah. And I think it's also skewed regionally as well, right? So you have Middle East GCC markets where there's still there's government funding in there. There's a lot of, government mandated, you will go and roll out these networks and make them great. But there's a lot of competition, good returns and investment in some of these markets still, relatively speaking, compared to Europe, where it just seems where we're at that lull, and there's a lot of waiting for what's going to drive investment, which will actually drive a return.
Yeah.
Here's a thing that's come up in previous pods, especially William Webb one. And I don't know if this overlaps with your day job. Ericsson especially, but also Nokia, when they've been doing their quarterlies, and every quarterly they're like, yeah, I know it's been another tough one, but there's fucking light on the horizon. And a big, I mean, they've got a slightly more prosaic light on the horizon, which is that operators have been drawing down on inventory, and sooner or later they're going to run out of inventory and they've got to buy some more. But then their broader, more conceptual, long-term one is this constant rise in mobile data traffic means they've got to invest more in kit just to handle that volume. And then Williams made the case that the data traffic thing's on an S-curve. He thinks that S-curve is quite near the plateau. Other people, I did speak to some other people, I can't remember who they are, and I can't even remember where it was on the record, so it's probably just as well. But they went, nah, he's talking shit. We're still very much in the exponential phase. Well, I can't remember who it was, and it was off the record, so I'll leave it there. Yeah. But it was someone on the operator side.
Well, it's clearly not in the exponential phase. So that they were talking shit if they even used that expression, because the growth rate.
Well, I don't think they did. I'm not quoting them precisely, but they were definitely arguing.
The growth rates have gone down.
So you picture an S curve.
Yeah.
They were basically arguing that we're still earlier in the S curve than William.
Right, it might be earlier, but it's not exponential.
Right,
just
fair
by
enough.
definition.
There's also like that ongoing transition from LTE to 5G, which is going to drive some continued increase in traffic.
But is this something that you get insight into in your day job, like data traffic volumes? And do you have any thoughts on that?
We don't see data traffic volumes per se. We're able to see it from some of our background data, but it's very much time spent on different networks. So we'll use that to say, okay, how much time is spent on Wi-Fi versus cellular. Right. So not a proxy for data volumes. I think that would echo conversations we have with customers. I think where the focus is moving to more for them in the conversations I'm party to is where can we drive investment to improve those fringe cases where there's a real need for connectivity, more congested areas of the country, of the network.
The classics or airport stadiums.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. On the way back from on the way here from Barcelona, that trying to get on the network in the airport.
Yeah.
To call my wife to tell her I was about to board the flight that was 3 hours delayed because of a lightning strike.
Bad luck.
That was.
God, I had a whole holiday virtually cancelled because of fucking lightning once.
But you're even if you were to buy into the person that you spoke to's case that it's more aggressive.
I'll tell you after you'll crack up.
The more aggressive growth than William makes out. The problem with saying that is that's the argument that Ericsson and Nokia make for why telcos need to spend again on kit.
Exactly. Well, that was how I framed this whole thing.
But the problem with that argument is that one of the reasons they're not spending on kit at the moment is because they're not making a good. We've talked about this all the time. They're not making a very good return on their 5G investments.
Yeah.
And if you're only spending to cope with traffic growth, but you're not making any more money from that traffic growth.
Yeah, exactly. You're still fucked.
Then you're not still fucked. You're more fucked.
Right.
You're in real shit because then you really are on a sort of path to maybe even losses.
Yeah, and this is why I was curious on the BT announcement, just thinking on the network slicing side and whether they were going to introduce, because I know a lot of telcos across the other side of the pond are thinking around this, how you mentioned this a bit in a pod before, I think, Ian, just how they moved to more usage-based pricing and whether that would come to prioritization within the network and whether that be dynamic.
So AT&T's CTO, an event that Scott and I were at, maybe you were there, the TM Forum, Copenhagen one, very software, used to be all about OSS, BSS.
I used to cover OSS and BSS back in my
But it's got a bit more... Yeah, it used to be really like OSS, and it's got a bit broader. It's like there's cloud.
So you're familiar with the TM Forum event then?
Yes.
But I remember Jeremy Legg, he's called, who's the CTO of AT&T, on stage saying maybe we need to think about moving away from the all-you-can-eat model to a more usage-based model. And I don't think by that he meant treat it the way the taxi companies do, where it's metered. Well, you obviously couldn't do that because even though it isn't exponential, it's still going up, and it's going up at a rate where you couldn't increase prices at that rate. It just wouldn't work. Yeah. But maybe trying to do it in a more sensible way than just have as much as you want and pay £10 a month sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
because they've tried to do that before, they flip-flop between meter charging and unlimited.
Well, I think in 3G, one of the reasons 3G didn't really take off is because they didn't really know how to price it, and they tried to do it on a kind of per kilobyte at the time, probably basis, and people didn't want to do that because you're worried about what you're using and spending. But you could do it in a more... And I know there are tiers at the moment. It's like my own son on O2 gets to 10 gigabytes, and if he wants 20, you pay a bit more. But I think they could be a bit smarter about that, maybe. And
yeah, absolutely.
Because they moan about, there's all this usage and we don't monetize it, and it's like, well, it's kind of your fault, guys. You just basically have as much as you want or as you're likely to use, and pay this fee for it. So. Yeah,
and I think we can't have our cake and eat it, right? In markets like the UK, where competition's been prioritized and prices are fairly low, we can't expect the operators to continue investing with that
Somebody's
kind of business
give.
model, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to move it on just because we're nearly out of time. I don't think we're gonna get to do my self-indulgent bit. One thing I will say, Mark, I mean one of the reasons we've spent so much time talking about the EE event rather than core Ookla stuff is because you're such a perfect guest to just talk about this kind of random stuff. So I will say to you,
enjoy.
even though you're based in Barcelona, keep in touch. If you're like back in the UK, I don't expect you to fly over especially, although obviously I'm grateful that you did.
Well, we could all fly over to Barcelona.
Or we could all just fly over to Barcelona.
I mean, there's plenty of analysts in
Well, I tell you what. I mean, one thing we do, talk about advanced booking. We're always looking for a guest at Mobile World Congress, so maybe we'll book you in for that. But I was going to say, we'll keep recording for another 20 minutes. But if you're over here anyway and you fancy it, just get in touch. I mean, you work with a PR agency we're very familiar with, CC Group, and it looks like there's sort of hardly anything that we bang on about that you couldn't participate in. So you're on top of your areas of core expertise. You're a really good general purpose guest. So yeah, and that's also my apology for not sort of drilling down more into any stuff you might have had on your.
No, I think the one thing you did ask me that I didn't respond to was why analyst at Ookla.
Yeah,
and I think the main thing is that Ookla is very well known for its consumer-facing brands, where it's not so well known. And we're building that knowledge is in the industry.
Yep.
So we have a lot of data, a lot of insights. We're looking to build, more advanced insights for our customers, and we need to start sharing some of those insights more.
So it's helpful to come on an industry-leading podcast.
Precisely.
Good luck with that. Until then, you'll have to settle for this.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Hey, I'm here all week trying to veal. Right, we can just move on to one other thing. We won't get to do my bit. I was going to go on about social media people getting arrested and censored and all that sort of thing. But it's fine. It just happens to be what I've been writing about. No, I think your stuff's much more interesting. I want to start to tee it up because we don't even know if this is what the story's about. Can you have you got the email that we've been chatting about that you got your bit of fan mail?
No.
Do you need to? Oh, did you send it on our little chat group? Can I get it from that?
I have to look at my phone because it makes noises. Apparently.
Oh, well, you can look now. I'll override Pierre. Just dig it up because it's kind of essential for this.
It's in the Teams.
It is. There's a whole thing in the Teams.
It's right there.
Okay. Well, then maybe I'll read it out if it's in the Teams.
Go on, then.
Is this all of it? I think it is. Okay. So Ian shared this. We've got a little Teams group with just me, Pierre, and Ian, which is to do with the pod.
This is just designed to embarrass me.
Well, I don't think it is embarrassing, and I think it's hilarious.
Badge
and
of
I
honor,
think
maybe.
Can I just say, it just says hi. It doesn't say hi, Ian.
Well, because he wouldn't even use my name, would he?
And he didn't use his either.
All right, well,
hers.
let's stop teasing it, and I'll just read it out. So this is an email that Ian got. It says, "Hi, it's no wonder you, in inverted commas, quote, write, close quote, for light reading, and have never written for a real media group." I mean, I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. Like FT or something, I suppose.
Well, it's poor research anyway, because I've written for The Economist and The Guardian.
Ah. Are you written for Guardian?
Yeah, I used to do book reviews for them regularly.
Did you?
Yes, I told you that before.
I've forgotten.
Oh, all right.
I'm getting senile. And then, okay, so end of sentence 1. Start of sentence 2. You're a lightweight, which I can confirm he's not. I mean, I think I could perhaps have like a 1 pint edge on you, but you're definitely not a lightweight. You're a lightweight.
Well, I've already got 3 full.
Had a lot of training.
You're already on your 4th, and he's not slurring. You're a lightweight, and no one respects you. Oh my God, meow. Your style. Oh, full stop, and then starting the next sentence with a lowercase y. Your style. I'm still projecting on the grammar.
Yeah.
Your style is akin to an 18-year-old uni ... who thinks they're witty and creative, when in fact you demonstrate
That sounds
endless.
quite good.
Yeah. When in fact you demonstrate endless editorial incompetence. Endless. I like the endless bit. There's no limit to your editorial incompetence and immaturity. Double semicolon and anger. He can fucking talk. We're assuming here it could be a she. You're an angry boy from Little England. Brackets, the quote UK close quotes is a mirage. I don't even know what that means. Maybe we'll get into that. Yeah. You are perfect for irrelevant trade media, never for the big time. Signed, a big admirer, all capitalised. A, all capitalised.
I'm sure under different circumstances we could have been great friends.
Was this internal feedback? Part of the...
This was his salary review, and he won't be buying any beers.
By the way,
after.
that was Phil Harvey.
Yeah. So anyway, he shared that, and I just loved it because it took me back. I mean, we moved to a new platform almost a year ago, and and we lost the comments section on Telecoms.com. And every now and then, once in
that's the sort of thing you get.
I heard you
yeah,
mention
like once a month or whatever, I'd get flamed on the comments, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I just think it's really good, but partly because, I mean, the more sort of silly, trivial side is, these people like this one that Ian got sent to, and this is an email, obviously.
They care enough to send it, right?
They care enough to send it, but they don't care enough to really structure their argument in a very coherent or sophisticated way. But secondly, then it's fun to sort of bait them a little bit. But then lastly, like the more serious point is I think it's a degree of validation. It shows someone's reading. It shows they give a shit. So I think there's some, I'm not going to quote it right, but there's someone like, better to be hated than ignored or something like that.
Yeah.
There's some quote along those lines. Anyway, Ian,
well, I know.
What are your thoughts about that email?
I mean, you'd rather get positive feedback.
Ideally,
obviously. You can't please everybody.
Yeah, listeners, please weigh in with some positive feedback.
Yeah. Give us some feedback. You have to email us because we haven't got comments on the fucking site.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're, kind of doing pretty well traffic-wise, and we're read by people that kind of matter, because even Howard came over this morning and went, I read your thing on Vodafone 3, and so, he's entitled to it.
And I was chatting to a PR mate who used to PR a major kit vendor who I won't specify, who said he always used to get them going, have you seen what fucking Ian's written now?
Yeah.
So they all care.
He's the things I don't like about it are, one, if you're going to say stuff like that, man up.
Don't be anonymous.
Have some balls.
It's a bit
tell
nasty,
me who you
isn't
are.
it, as well?
Yeah. And the reason he doesn't want to man up is because it's very spiteful, and it's quite xenophobic as well. All this little Englander and the UK Mirage thing.
This is what makes me think it's a yank.
And it's also incredibly disparaging towards the trade press generally. And it's like, okay, maybe you think the trade press is a waste of time, but the real media groups that he refers to wouldn't cover any of the stuff that we cover. I mean, even the guys who were at the event that we were at earlier, I think, who were from the FT. And,
the FT was there, and they do a great job.
Struggle to get a good story out of what went on today, because it's very much in the weeds. I think they've probably gone along. Whereas if they are covering it, by the way, and I don't know if the FT's written anything on it, but it would have to be on the commercial side of it. But the stuff about the overhaul of the network isn't stuff that the main press covers. So if you want,
and they would have done 10, 20 years ago.
It's like saying we want less media coverage almost, instead of be that disparaging about the trade press. It's not a specific comment about telecom. You could be on a shipping title and be covering things that nobody's going to write about in the Telegraph, but do you want that or don't you want that? I mean, my view is that any information's good, and if you're in the industry, you'd want to have a Jeremy Clarkson on his Clarkson's Farm thing, subscribing to Farmer's World or whatever it's called, Farmer's Weekly, and reading these stories that he's trying to learn stuff from.
To see if FT had written it up, and I presume it'd be unrealistic to assume they'd turned it around that quickly. So I just Googled FTEE into Google News. What was the top headline you can see there?
Well, that's probably the story that's been, the fridges and coffee machines. But if you go to the...
BT to start selling fridges, which I know really pissed off BT and EE.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So I think that the sort of not a real media group, I mean, I don't see the quality distinction, to be honest, these days anyway, between what the Telegraph and the Mail and the FT might write and what trade titles will write. It's just they've got completely different audiences. I mean, we don't write about pensioners getting cut off because 3G's been switched off in the way that the Daily Mail would.
So I'll tell you what I thought.
Wouldn't write about Open RAN.
I'll tell you what I thought when I first read it.
It's just bizarre.
Some of those little ad hominems and those little digs, especially the bit where he goes, your style is akin to an 18-year-old uni ... which I presume he means uni student, who thinks they're witty and creative. So
I don't mind that, because
I'm just interpreting it. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm interpreting it. And for people who listen who maybe don't read Ian's stuff, he writes news analysis, and he'll quite often start with a paragraph or two of contextualizing that may be a little bit tangential and maybe a little bit humorous, but it's always entertaining. And I think a big part of the job of being a writer, especially when you're covering quite dry subject matter like we are, is to try and make it a bit entertaining.
Yeah.
You still get to the nub of the matter.
Yeah.
But anyway, but you sort of try.
That's why people tune into the pod, right? You've got the irreverent part, but also covering
we've
the
got
topics that matter.
us drinking beer and talking shit part. I mean, you're not going to listen to 2 hours of telecoms without a little bit of banter, right?
I think reading between the lines, what's really happened here is that there's this. Maybe this is the neat segue that we're all looking for. That I've written something that doesn't really go along with his view of the world.
So I had a reckon when you shared that. And I think,
and I'm fairly sure it's a bloke because women don't write emails like that. I don't want to be sexist because it could be a woman, but I suspect it's a bloke.
And
women aren't that fucking stupid.
And with the same caveats about generalising across the sexes, I think. I think if a woman wanted to be that obnoxious, she would have done it in a slightly different way.
Yeah,
and I'll leave it there. I won't drill down into what she might have done. But anyway, and then you went. After we'd sort of bantered for a little bit, you were like, not sure what I've written that touched such a nerve. And I immediately went onto the site and I saw what was the featured story on the site at the time we were chatting. You've written a story where the headline is, Huawei is starting to look unstoppable. And so straight away I was like, well, that's obviously going to trigger some fucking people.
It could be that one.
There's certainly not a reason not to write it. In fact, on the contrary, I think headlines that trigger people in a purely pragmatic, like journalistic plumbing way, with that, you don't want to fall into full clickbait, but, a headline like that, you're going to be like, oh, Jesus Christ, what's this bloke on about?
I mean, it could be that because I do think that's probably our most read story of the year.
Of the year?
It could be.
Oh, wow. So
it got a lot of traffic, I think.
Yeah, well, because it's such it's a lesson in headline writing. I mean, so long as the headline is supported by the body copy, which I'm sure it is, and I have read through it, obviously. But it's just a great, simple, but punchy and compelling headline. It makes you want to click through.
Yeah.
And anyway, but then you start off and you do your thing where you have a paragraph or two of tangents talking about the Rings of Power, which is the Amazon's go
second
at
season
Lord of
now,
the Rings.
right?
I've started watching
it. Better than the first season,
It does seem a little bit better.
Yeah, it's got better, but it's still not.
Well, they do some callbacks to the first season that seem quite good, but I remember watching the whole first season and just being a bit meh.
Yeah, the first
anyway,
season's a bit rubbish. But...
well, let's just read it out so this person can understand which part of your prose might have provoked them. In a scene from The Rings of Power, Amazon's lavish but somewhat unloved Lord of the Rings prequel, a mob of sword-wielding, scaly-faced orcs go at Sauron like a table of famished diners at a bloody steak. Seemingly vanquished, the wannabe Dark Lord pulls off a disappearing trick only to return as a misshapen tangle of black fibres, gorging on vermin and eventually people until he's rebuilt in human form, albeit unrecognisable. Now, apart from the fact that you're having some fun with writing and language there, you're ultimately setting up the point of Huawei is supposed to have been fucking stamped into oblivion. And now
is Sauron as well.
Yeah, Huawei Sauron in this analogy, isn't it?
So he surely would have liked me comparing Huawei to Sauron. I mean, Huawei would be happy with that story, apart from the.
Well, Huawei's presumably happy. But... I mean, I don't want to ask you in case it's too delicate for you to answer.
The first paragraph we got at A.
And don't read the main trilogy of what happens, right? Yeah.
Shit. The computer's run out of juice.
Dead.
The computer's out of juice. And it's fine. It's a good thing I'm not doing my stuff, isn't it?
The story is, because they came out with their first half results, I think, recently, which Robert Clark covered as a kind of news story while I was on holiday. And the headline figures, and there were only headline figures because they basically say nothing.
Yeah, they send tiny little, because they're not public.
Oh, it's nothing at all. I mean, the annual reports
they don't have to share anything.
But but these updates they do on an interim basis don't have anything in, but the sales growth is like a third, I think, and the profit margins are up, and they're pretty healthy. They're like up at sort of 13-14% as a net profit margin.
Yeah.
And you think this is a company that a few years ago was being hit with all sorts of sanctions, and
still is
being hit with all sorts of sanctions, and people were like, oh, where's it going to go? I mean, when the same thing happened with ZTE, it was almost out of business until Donald Trump went, no, it's all right, it's off the entity list now, it can
they were
deal with it again.
They were having a nightmare.
And I think the expectation was that it would be, they can get access to cutting edge chips and
severely hampered,
and people were writing the kind of obituaries almost for Huawei, and they're those results alone, if you just take those headline results, now there's not a like for like comparison between Huawei, I get, and the people that they would be compared to by ours like Ericsson and Nokia, because they do other things.
Yeah.
But on a headline basis, with all the challenges they've had, they are in a much, much healthier position. Where you look at Ericsson and Nokia these days, and it's declines by quite considerable
Despite the fact they don't
amounts.
have that competition in
Despite the
a number
fact-
of markets, right?
They were supposed to be the guys that would mop up the Huawei work. Now, the other thing is, if you can go, well, a lot of that comes from what's happened on the devices side. The sanctions, by the way, this is the weird thing for me about the sanctions. The sanctions are mainly aimed at hurting Huawei in 5G networks. We can't have 5G networks from Huawei because they might include backdoors for spy. Remember all this?
Yeah, and then the CCP will start spying on everything. And
So they were mainly aimed at hurting Huawei networks. Where they mainly hurt it was actually on the devices side, because they couldn't get the chips that they need for
not just Qualcomm, but also
the
Google
software.
Play Store. You couldn't get full fat Google.
So they couldn't get Google software, and they couldn't get cutting edge chips.
Crippled the Huawei devices out.
Yeah, and
Pretty much,
the device sales went down by 50%. Now they're back. They're back with this smartphone called the Mate 60 Pro. It's apparently, according to all the analyst firms, like people like Counterpoint.
So that's the thing from last year, where everyone's trying to work out whether or not, because the other thing, so you're right to flag up Qualcomm, but the other thing within it is America trying to stop them getting hold of any chips that are made on the latest production node, manufacturing process.
So 5 nanometer.
Yeah, and we're down to 3 now, I think.
Which I think is only like TSMC and Samsung doing, and they couldn't get access to them because they use American equipment, basically.
And then they came out with something last year that looked like it'd been made on 7 nanometer, which they're not supposed to be able to get hold of. And so that got everyone really intrigued whether SMIC, which is their main fab, is suddenly able to do this stuff that the Yanks have tried their best to stop them doing.
It performed really well as well, right?
Yeah, so it's all a real like whack-a-mole thing where every time America tries to stamp on something, China just sort of adapts.
But if you take that,
back to your Lord of the Rings
that part of it
analogy
out of it, and you park the consumer stuff, which was making about 50% of their revenues, I think, before sanctions, and then went down. Now it's kind of come back again to some extent. Well,
included Honor as well.
Included Honor, which they sold. That was the reason I think it actually went down. They sort of sold, yeah. But then if you just park that and go, well, all right, let's have a look at the network side. The network side hasn't really suffered at all. The network side, which was the bit that the sanctions was really supposed to hurt, it went down a couple of percentage points, I think. Now, what they've done recently is they've stopped breaking out. They call it ICT infrastructure now. But they've actually taken out of that all the cloud stuff, all the automotive stuff they're doing. So ICT infrastructure is really enterprise networking services of the kind of stuff that Ericsson and Nokia do as well, and the carrier business. And it was up, I think, or flattish this year compared with declines at Ericsson and Nokia. So it's had no impact at all, despite the fact that several countries have come along and gone, we're not going to use your equipment anymore. And I think the other thing is that the US campaign to get countries in Europe and NATO countries to not use Huawei equipment has been, I mean,
mixed.
I don't think it's been good. I mean, there's a guy I talk to occasionally, an analyst, but a bit of a shout out for him. I don't know if he listens to the pod, but Earl Lum, who works for a company called EJL Wireless.
Yeah, well, I saw you quoted him a fair bit in that piece.
He's a real chips expert. He's like, used to work in the industry and really knows his stuff and does teardowns of equipment and looks at chips and knows quite a lot about the specifics. And I've talked to him a few times, but if you look at the performance of the latest gear, it's I mean, one thing that he's often said to me actually is a point that I think the anti-Huawei, if you like, analysts come out with is this idea, and you alluded to these smaller chips that you need this lithography equipment to be able to produce.
Yeah,
you can only get from
the smaller manufacturing process. 7 nanometer and below.
You need this extreme ultraviolet lithography to sort of do it in a kind of very profitable way.
Which only Dutch ASML has got.
They have a complete monopoly in that area. But there seems to be this view that I think is really kind of tired and a bit xenophobic as well, I have to say, that the Chinese will never catch up on EUV. It's such a hard thing to do, and it took ASML years to get there, and it was like a combined international effort that to ever expect the Chinese to get there, it's going to be a 10-year job. And Earl Lum's like,
it's a
people who come out with this, you look at...
Yeah, and it's like genie back in the bottle type of thing.
But you look at people were saying the same thing, by the way, when Huawei and ZTE were perceived to be just copycat companies, like ripping off Western equipment. Oh, they've looked at what Cisco does and they've just done the same thing.
They'll never be able
and
to
then
innovate
years later, they were regarded, I remember Neil McRae when he was still at BT on stage saying they're the only 5G company, frankly, in terms of what they can do. They were perceived to be the guys that make the best equipment. And I think this view that they're never going to be able to do, that China's never going to be able to have EV with a 1.4 billion people, you're going to produce a few Einsteins who are going to solve.
Well, and apparently their rate of graduates is just silly compared to ours.
So, and I think that's the point that Erlund was making. But
so I'm gonna have to butt in because Pierre's got his thing coming up in 5 minutes. So I'm gonna.
That's a good reason.
I'm gonna have to cut short. And a bit shame, just because this tangent to do with the US attempt to put the Chinese technological genie back in the bottle is very close to my heart, and I find it really interesting. And I find just American foreign policy really interesting because I think they're barking up the wrong tree at the moment. I think they're
massive implications.
I think they're so used to being the global hegemon that they're increasingly clutching at straws to maintain that. And I'm sure we did it last Brits like 150 years ago. And I'm sure it always happens. I'm sure it's a very predictable thing. But you've got to come to a stage, as we did eventually, and it probably took us a fucking long time, maybe not till the end of the Second World War or whatever, just go, all right, fair enough, we're not where we once were. Or in America's case, it's not that they aren't what they once were, but there is another. People talk about multipolar rather than unipolar stuff. China's going to be big, and it's going to dominate its sphere of influence of East Asia and Southeast Asia and all that.
Well, I think that's the other, just before we finish, I think this is one of the big reasons why they've done so well is because you can rely on that Chinese market. When you've got a market that's that big, that spends a lot more on 5G kit, by the way, than any other country and has a lot more base stations, they're still going to buy Huawei. You can do what you want to them on the chip side.
The Chinese market alone.
They're still going to buy Huawei.
They build very strong relations with developing markets as well.
They do.
Africa, famously, China's
and the
very strong.
pushback's just been quite small, really. Outside the UK and a few other countries, not that many people have actually gone against Huawei. The Germans are pushing back on it massively at the moment. So
sorry to cut everyone short, although perhaps you might be grateful that I haven't put you on the spot to talk about geopolitics. But yeah, do come back. I think we could chat about whatever.
Yeah.
So do let us know when you're in town.
Will do.
And bear that in mind for when we get into the new year. If you're at Mobile Congress, let's chalk you up to be our guest when we do our on-site one.
For sure. I'm like 15 minutes drive from the Fiera. That's where I live.
Oh, that's perfect.
Wow. Oh, you're that
It's
close.
that close. Yes.
Shit.
I know. Bit too close for comfort.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, of course, because that's the south of Barcelona.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we better wrap it up there. Hopefully, you'll join us in the pub for a cheeky one or two after Mark. But it's great to meet you. Thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks for making the effort. It's much appreciated.
Ditto.
And thanks everyone. I hope the wait wasn't too painful for you. I hope you're happy to have boring things like summer holidays in between podcasts. And yeah, next one hopefully, I don't want to say, but a returning guest is going to come on, and that's always a treat. So make sure you join us for the next one. Bye.